After 7 years and 172 episodes, we've come to the final Tom Baker story. And it's a strong one to go out on, with a wonderfully dark atmosphere, a thoroughly evil villain, and a magnificently brooding performance by Baker himself. Possibly because he was fed up at the time, but it works for the character, and he definitely goes out on a high. The first episode is very different to anything we've seen recently. We have scenes on present-day Earth for the first time in ages. If you don't count Shudder, there haven't been any since City of Death 2 years earlier. And seeing ordinary people just going about their business really grounds the show. You can certainly understand why they keep going back to present-day Earth in the current series. It's overlaid with a creepy, eerie atmosphere that makes it feel a bit like Sapphire and Steel, with the faceless evil lurking in the background, killing off random characters for no apparent reason. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Adric are in the TARDIS. This continues their master-student relationship. Only this time around it's a bit more annoying, as Adric's basically just asking lots of questions. This is one of the first stories to really explore the possibilities of the TARDIS. We actually see the chameleon circuit and get a demonstration of what it can theoretically do, although with very basic 1981 era graphics. We continue to see new areas of the TARDIS, which is an ongoing theme in the early 80s. This time round we get to see the cloisters, which is not particularly useful, but it does give you the impression of the TARDIS being vast in size and thousands of years old. We also get the unforgettable sequence where the Master's TARDIS materialises inside the Doctor's, and the Doctor and Adric are trapped in an endless loop. Something similar happened in the Time Monster, but this version is much more effective, with the lighting and music combining to make it feel like the characters are descending into the depths of hell. It's Janet Fielding's first story as Tegan, and she makes a good first impression. Likeable and outspoken, without being too annoying so far. For once, she's not a scientific genius, like all the other characters, but she's not completely stupid, as she does recognise that the TARDIS is a spaceship, despite absolutely no evidence to show that it is. And later on, when they get to Logopolis, rather than being cowed by the alienness of it all, she's strong enough to complain about it looking like a sweatshop, which is the sort of thing that Sarah Jane might have said, so that does bode well for the future. Logopolis itself is realised quite well. The model shot is simple but effective, and it does a good job of matching the sets, and you get a good sense of this planet being a calm place of study and seclusion. John Fraser as the Monitor is a very likeable guest actor. He has to speak for the entire population of his planet, and he does a good job. This is Anthony Ainley's first real story as the Master, and it's the first time we've seen the Master back at the peak of his powers since Frontier in Space. He's clearly made to look like Roger Delgado, with the goatee and the all-black outfit, but he doesn't quite have the same air of smooth sophistication, and he maybe overdoes it with the sinister laughing. His entire plan in this story seems to be just to mess with whatever the Doctor is doing. So the Doctor decides to go to Earth and measure a phone box. The Master decides to get there first and turn his TARDIS into an evil phone box that kills people. The Doctor decides to go to Logopolis, and the Master follows him there and tries to take over. He's basically just out to get the Doctor whoever he can, which is much scarier than if he had an actual plan. His manipulation of Nyssa, taking over the body of her father and using it to control her, might be one of the most evil things that any Doctor Who villain has ever done. And Tegan has almost as much reason to hate him as well. So I'll be keeping an eye on how they both react to him going forward. The big climax happens back on Earth, where the Master attempts to blackmail the entire universe, before the Doctor stops him by unplugging a cable. The effects aren't great, and it would have been nice to see the Doctor actually fall to his death, but then it's possible they wouldn't have allowed that to be broadcast. Still, the clips of past enemies and companions make for a nice celebration of the era. It's just a pity that they couldn't have got Sarah Jane and Leela back to record new scenes, like was the original plan. The Watcher is one of the most mysterious characters in all of Doctor Who. He appears throughout the story, but always at a distance. All the characters talk to him, but we never get to hear their conversations. So he is very similar to the old woman in 73 Yards, except her motives are much more sinister. Here the Watcher is treated as if he might be evil, but in the end he turns out to be benign, and merges with the Fourth Doctor to create the Fifth. It's far from clear exactly where he came from in the first place though. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a future story as David Tennant's 14th Doctor coming back and becoming his own father-in-law. That would certainly tie up a few loose ends, but realistically it's probably not very likely. As well as the final Tom Baker story, this is also the end of season 18. The presence of Adric and the return of Nyssa does make it feel a bit like a new series finale, where they bring back old characters from throughout the season. But it's really more of a thematic conclusion, with all the themes of entropy and decay finally coming to the forefront after being built up as subtext throughout the preceding stories. There is a lot of technobabble in the script, and a lot of it is still quite hard to understand, so it might seem like the worst possible story to show to a child to get them interested in watching the show. But as I've said before, this is the first story I remember watching, and I've been a fan of it since, so it must have stuck with me. I'm sure I couldn't have understood half of what was going on back then. I still don't now. But the weirdness and the atmosphere definitely kept me watching, and it's full of images that have stayed in my head for more than 40 years. So it'll always be one of my favourite stories because of that. The DVD has more than an hour of extras. The main one, A New Body at Last, is a 50-minute documentary that tells the whole story of how Tom Baker left and Peter Davison came into the show. It's not really focused on Logopolis. I think you have to buy the Blu-ray for a documentary that's specifically about that. But you do get to see behind the scenes of how they filmed the regeneration. And there's lots of great quotes from Tom Baker and Peter Davison, so it's a very thorough and well-produced piece. There's also a short nationwide interview with Tom, which was on the Season 17 Blu-ray. There's a more relaxed nationwide interview with Peter Davison. There's a 12-minute clip from Pebble Mill with another Peter Davison interview, where they show him lots of viewers' thoughts on what costume he should wear. And some audience members give their thoughts as well, including an anachronistic David Tennant lookalike. There's also brief clips from the news, announcing Tom and Lala's wedding, Tom's departure, and Peter's casting. Overall, it's a fantastic end to the season, and definitely one of my favourites, so I have to give it a 9. So that's the Tom Baker era finished, after I've spent more than a year reviewing it. I'll be doing a special farewell video later this week, where I'll be revealing my top 10 Tom stories. As for next week, I won't be starting on the 5th Doctor just yet. The spin-off K9 and Company aired between the seasons, so I'll be covering that instead. So subscribe if any of that appeals to you, and I'll see you next time.